Hello. Can everybody hear me? Good evening. Happy Monday to everybody. We are here. What the hell is today's date? We are, oh my gosh, March 4th already. Hope everybody had a good weekend. We're back for a little bit more World of Warcraft before the reset. We'll figure out what we're going to do tonight, but I believe I would like to watch a Mad Season video that I caught a piece of today, and it really interested me. From a couple years ago, just the history of WoW. So I want to listen to it, and obviously we'll throw in some reactions while we do it. Keep it pretty chill on the back end as far as the game goes. I got nothing going on tonight, so we're going to not do a whole lot. In fact, I may just clean up my mail. It needs cleaned up pretty bad with all these characters sending stuff back and forth. So, anywho, I'm going to start this here right off the bat so that I can get through it all, because it's a long one, which is why I want to hear it all. And we will start with the mail on these guys from the bottom up. So if you got anything to say, feel free. Type in chat. I am going to be listening. Throw out some love to Mad Season if you haven't before. Give him a like, give him a follow. He's a big time OG from Classic WoW all the way through.
An obsession? Sure, but the question is, does the international addiction to an internet game represent a danger? Maybe, but there is also no indication that anything can slow the explosive growth of the intoxicating game called World of Warcraft.
Well, wasn't that true for everybody? It still is. Does everybody remember that? Oh my god.
And by the way, you don't want that to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
Yeah, the old do we want classic servers.
You guys take care of us, man. You guys really take care of us. All I can do is all day, every day.
Do y'all ever do that? You guys old enough to have gone out to GameStop or something for a midnight release, sit out there forever waiting for that game to open up at 12 o'clock, run in and buy it, and just packed with people. What a time to be alive back then. How to be younger. You do miss that about the brick and mortar stores these days.
Incredible 16 hours a day. His mother says his personality has changed and that he's become moody and violent, and his addiction is tearing the family apart.
But our actions are going to matter more than any of these.
Is that the response to the sexual assault claims? Can I just say how sad I was when I found out that that was fake? I was one of the ones who bought in hook, line, and sinker when I initially saw it, that it was real.
Oh my god, I just ran in. The power level where I basically get all the good loot and they get all the great experience.
Holy shit, I never did that. What a great intro. Ah, yes.
In the world of MMORPGs, you'll scarcely find anyone who hasn't heard of, if not played, the World of Warcraft. Released in 2004, it would quickly begin to make a name for itself, garnering worldwide praise for its innovation, accessibility, and the closeness to the community by its developer, Blizzard Entertainment. both celebrated and condemned for its addictiveness. In the span of a few short months, it would not only become the most popular of the MMORPG genre, but also set the standard for all of those that would follow in its footsteps. Many would try, and over the course of 15 years, few would gain even a fraction of the player base
Jesus,
of the
look at that.
seemingly unstoppable giant. Today, though, a much different picture is painted. What was initially considered inspirational in the world of gaming.
Hey, Miss Spaz, how we doing?
Behind a controversial history.
How are you doing tonight? I'll pause this so I can talk to Miss Spaz for a second, see how she's doing here before we go back to the video. Don't have a big enough chat to worry about too much else. Oh my gosh, all that stuff. Okay.
Marred with what many describe as betrayal, deception, and squandered potential, leaving many asking the question, how? A snapshot of history of a world created within a world, a microcosm of mayhem, a virtual playground for humanity to show each other their best and their worst. This is the story of Blizzard Entertainment and their iconic MMORPG, the World of Warcraft. At the dawn of the new millennium, the online world was growing rapidly.
Oh my god.
And over the
Hold on, I gotta go back to this. This shit was too funny. Anybody who's old enough to remember that? This. Anybody alive for that? What'd you guys do? Whenever the clock struck midnight on 12/31 and 99. Because I can tell you what I did. And it was damn near shitting my pants. I was watching it at a buddy's house, watching the ball drop, and had the girlfriend and a couple other friends were over. And as soon as it hit midnight, everything in the house went black. We thought everything had shut off. And here it was, my asshole friend's father had cut the power to the entire house at the stroke of midnight. What an asshole. I love that guy. Rest in peace, buddy. He was a hoot, but man, did he have us all on that one. It was, still remember it today, 24 years later.
At the dawn of the new millennium, the online world was growing rapidly. The intellect of man and the advancements of technology combined bestowed upon the world the creation of the internet. By Al Gore, news of a new Star Wars movie was spreading, the storyboard for The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring had been completed, nerd culture was about to reach critical mass, and Bill Clinton did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Yeah,
so entered
just
the
like his
massively
wife and him
popular
never killed
online
anybody
role-playing
too.
Game, or MMORPG for short. The creation of the first MMO can be traced all the way.
Oh, I didn't know this. What is this? Mud. Multi-user dungeon. Huh. Multi-user dungeon with later variants, multi-user dimension, multi-user domain, descriptions of room objects, other players, non-player characters, actions performed in a virtual world. MUDs. Implement a role-playing video games in a fantasy world populated by fictional races and monsters role-playing. Really? I never heard this. MUDs. Look at this. Various web portals. The MUD connector. No shit. Okay.
Back to the 70s, depending on your definition and standards, as they would be text-based. Though they had existed for decades, it was only near the new millennia that they would attract a sizable player base. Although
Look at that. Oh my god, those fine graphics. Jesus.
They all shared the central idea of an online, persistent world to be shared with players from all over the globe.
Shit.
A
Those
genre
bring
unique
back
in the
memories.
sense that there is no planned end, no credits rolled, nor thanks for playing. Game content would be added as long as there are players playing, and the journey would only end when the player decided that it was over, a concept that was remarkably foreign to many at the time. In these early years,
I'll be honest, the idea that it never ends is probably the biggest reason why I got hooked by the game overall. That the main game doesn't even start until you hit max level after such an epic leveling process, because don't forget, I was leveling in the old classic experience, or vanilla experience, and then knowing that you really just would never be able to do it all, and even if you did, there is no end credits, there is no stop, you're done end credits, you can either restart or nothing. It just keeps going. By far was one of the most major contributing factors to me continuing to play this game and get hooked by it.
Many would try their hand in breaking through the genre, and overall, it would contain a niche audience. Some were beginning to make a name for themselves, though, such as Origin Systems' leap into the online persistent world with Ultima Online.
Yeah, I never got into
fantasy
Ultima.
Game, memorable for its PvP combat in particular. Mythic Entertainment, who would later develop Warhammer Online, took their
Dark
shot
Age of
with
Camelot.
Dark Age of Camelot, a third-person take on Arthurian lore mixed with Norse mythology and high fantasy. Star Wars would make their debut into the world of MMOs with the 2003 release, The Star Wars Galaxies, an MMO with a more heavy focus on community and sandbox gameplay. And
that's one of the things I am upset about, is the downfall of the Star Wars MMOs. I did have big hopes, but I still have big hopes for Star Wars. I'm so jaded against them right now, but I do love Star Wars. When it's good, it's great. When it's bad, it's infuriating. Unfortunately, right now we're at the infuriating stage, but I do hope that it gets better. I really do. But at any rate, for now we've got World of Warcraft, and if a good MMO ever comes out for Star Wars, I would certainly give it a look again.
the most prolific at the time was EverQuest in 1999 by Verant Interactive and 99 Studios, decrowning the previously reigning champion, Ultima Online. Just 24 hours after launch, it would quickly become the most subscribed MMORPG at 10,000 subscribers. Yeah, really. 10,000 was the most subscribed MMORPG
Holy
at the time.
shit,
It would eventually
10,000.
peak at over 500,000
10,000
years after its launch. But as history has
was the
shown,
highest.
This would yet be a fraction of the potential that was hidden within the genre.
What was World of Warcraft's? 12 million plus? I mean, that's incredible.
A potential that had yet to be realized. The MMO was on the rise, and the time to strike was nigh, and in the background, a beast was stirring, silently observing the strengths, the weaknesses, the successes, and the failures of the then relatively unexplored genre. Blizzard at this point already had established themselves as innovators with their Diablo, StarCraft, and Warcraft series, the latter being a real-time strategy game set in a fantasy world of orcs, elves, magic, and adventure. And having seen the success of other fantasy-based games such as EverQuest, the table was set. After halting development on an abandoned project, a small team of developers were left in limbo and were searching for inspiration on their next game. They had the IP, they had the funding, and most importantly, the timing.
So that's what caused it? Oh, commercial. Let's skip this. Because I honestly don't know this. I don't know what caused everything to start. But I know that it was particularly going after EverQuest.
September 2nd, 2001. Long before Blizzard was big enough to hold their own convention, they held a panel at London's European Computer Trade Show, and it was then that the public for the first time saw the world of Warcraft.
Oh, look how rough.
made it clear this was not the sequel to the popular RTS series at the time, but rather something completely different. Players would transition
I'm alright with you, Larkin Savile, that's fine. I appreciate you watching it all.
Creating their own heroes and making their own stories. The game would be multiplayer on a massive scale, bringing together fans of not only the Warcraft series, but of MMOs as a whole. The reaction, however, was
they did.
mixed. Some waited with eager anticipation, trying to imagine their beloved series making its leap into the massively multiplayer setting, and many were upset at the abrupt change of focus, preferring Blizzard to concentrate on what was proven to work, instead of taking a gamble into
I'd love to know this. I don't know anybody that played the older Warcraft games, not World of Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2. Is what he's saying, was that the general consensus at the time from everybody?
unfettered territory. The idea of paying a monthly fee to continue playing was a hard pill to swallow at the time, especially by Blizzard fans who had grown accustomed to the one-time purchase models set standard by the company. Work would continue on the project, however, and the very first interview would be claimed by the Computer Gaming World magazine. By this time, EverQuest was the clear reigning champion, but the genre as a whole had one fatal flaw, and that's the learning curve. XP loss, gear loss, and
oh my god, the learning curve. Welcome to today's world. It's the same thing. That's what costs the game.
Time investment in playing, it
new
cultivated
prospective
a very
clients.
niche and hardcore community, and the everyday casual player would quickly succumb to the intense difficulty and seek entertainment from other, more forgiving games. It was a genre with a focus on character progression, with death penalties centering around character regression and a steep learning curve to go along with it. However, this transition...
I will say that's one thing I wasn't down with, and may have actually been the downfall. Whenever they knock all these other games, it's always the character regression side of things. If you were to just die and come back, I don't think it would have been near as detrimental. WoW really jumped on top of that. And back then, they were all like that. I remember playing D&D games, and they were terrible with that. Now you just hit the just hit the graveyard and run back. Do it again.
Missionary period would prove to be a key moment where players for the first time would leave single-player games that looked like this into this online sprawling world. They were incomparable to each other, and although it's funny to think now, it was an intimidating thing. The time investment was, and still is, incredibly high. You had to have a computer, you had to have a good enough graphics card to run it, you had to have internet, and you had to pay a subscription. The amount of hurdles standing between the average person and the game were already high, and combined with the unforgiving gameplay of the landmark titles representing the genre, it was just too much for the average person. But it was this person, this untapped market of new and casual players that Blizzard would set their sights on. World of Warcraft took a completely different style of approach. During a time when XP loss was the bare minimum penalty for dying, World of Warcraft made you simply run back to your corpse.
One of the great things here is that when you die, and death is an inevitability in all these games, it's really not that big of a deal. All other online RPGs make death a really bad thing because dying should be bad, right? Well, in World of Warcraft, pretty much all that happens is you sit out for a bit. You respawn back at a graveyard, and you run and get your corpse, and you respawn. You don't lose experience points, you don't lose your items or any of that stuff.
When hitting the max level took years in other games, World of Warcraft it took months for most players. And when systems were complicated and confusing, requiring external literature to understand, World of Warcraft systems were relatively straightforward.
Boy, that's straight off of that path. Holy shit. Do you hear what he just said and what the game is now? If anybody plays retail, you understand exactly what I'm saying.
And when character stat and template choices were often permanent, World of Warcraft featured costly but reversible methods of character progression and customization. In other games, you had areas designed for large groups of high-level players, referred to as raids, but they were commonly out in the open world, which resulted in having to compete against one another for kill credit. Due to this, there was a greater sense of urgency to complete the raid in its entirety in one sitting before any other guild had the chance to catch up and bring unwanted competition. Marathon sessions of guilds shifts was a common strategy to maintain dominion of these raids, in many cases to the detriment of the health of the players. This Final Fantasy XI boss was engaged for 18 hours until players were forced to quit after they began to faint and vomit.
Shut the fuck up. Is that real?
Was nerfed shortly after the incident. This was
Holy
the state of
shit.
the endgame for most MMOs in these early stages. However, World of Warcraft had been one of the first MMOs to standardize instance raids, where players and guilds could create their own unique raid instances, resetting on a weekly basis. And as for the raid bosses themselves,
I still run Molten Core. Still run that fucking raid.
At the time,
still running it for fucking gear. Released in 2004. Still running that bitch.
With a higher health pool and increased damage, World of Warcraft would add unique, and often at the time, complex mechanics that required teamwork and thought to overcome, which in turn would become one of the game's major selling points. The worlds had NPCs, but were commonly static, whereas the world of Azeroth felt more alive with dynamic NPCs going about their daily lives. Simply put, what it didn't invent, it improved. MMOs were in a constant state of...
That was the World of Warcraft mantra, for anybody who doesn't know. Steal ideas from other companies, make it better, and now call it Blizzard's. That's it. That is the entire formula for them creating the majority of these games. And it worked beautifully.
Most of theirs, and World of Warcraft was the first one to bridge that gap and bring it into a more mainstream audience, and it reaped the rewards because of that. The game would continue development throughout the years, with teasers being released in the form of magazine interviews and trailers, keeping the curious onlooker abreast on its direction. And after a long alpha and beta testing period, the moment of truth came on November 23rd, 2004.
There we go. Still that way today in 2024. I will say they got a good launch this time, to the surprise of many in the community.
Its strategy of appealing to the casual gamer worked well. A little too well. Blizzard in no way was prepared for the frenzy of players eager to get into the world. Disconnects, lag, and rollbacks would persist heavily for the opening months, and still consistently through the next couple of years.
Jesus.
Forums daily would be filled with outrage, demands for a refund, and even threats of lawsuits.
Huh. Not a lot's changed.
The miraculous thing about it, though, is that it didn't even seem to slow its growth. The launch today is looked at as disastrous, and yet...
It's like somebody overdosing on meth. You want to find out what it was and why they were overdosing, and then get your hands on some too. It's the crack, because they're talking about the game in a manner with their friends and how pissed they are that they can't play the game. Understand what they were probably saying back then. Not that it was dog shit, that they've seen so much of it, haven't played it yet, haven't been able to.
Yet still, people came back again and again. How can a game that's playable maybe 50% of the time hold such a demand? Well, it's because it was that good.
There you go.
Development had paid off, as World of Warcraft quickly became a hit.
Best crack on the street.
Dwarfing all competition at the time and robbing them of their player bases. It was the vampire of the MMO industry at its release, and it would suck the life force out of every single previously mentioned staple of the genre.
But there was one unfortunate thing. The unfortunate thing was it launched right when WoW launched. Yeah. So WoW brought the whole industry down, not just us. Every online game out there went down as soon as WoW went out. WoW was like a huge succubus of players went over there and drove into WoW. And it drove all our numbers down.
60 levels of progression and a world of challenges awaited the eager player base, and there would be many landmark moments just waiting to be claimed. Players rushed to the max level, and the title of the world first
rush to the max level.
A player named Zenith, a troll rogue on the Storm Reaver server on December 3rd, 2004, a little less than 2 weeks after release. By today's standards, incredibly slow.
Yeah,
but
no
back
doubt.
Then, a no-life nerd,
2 weeks.
Onlookers weren't shy of expressing. On January 30th, 2005, the game would see its first raid cleared with the death of Anixia, taken down by the guild Ruined on the Proudmoore server, and many players for the first time got to see the famed epic quality items that she hoarded.
Purples. Give us the purples. That's fucking cool.
Blizzard would spend the following years perfecting their craft. As their subscriber base
Give them
increased,
the
so
purples.
too did their budget, and more servers would quickly be added to support the booming player base. New patches would not only release new raid tiers, but also systems, items, and much more. And in May of the same year, the subscriber base would see its biggest surge for the next decade.
Okay, mount them.
Okay guys, these eggs have given us a lot of trouble in the past.
There it is.
Does anybody need...
Fucking got me.
This guy, or can...
One of the earliest videos to go viral in the world of Warcraft was created by the guild Pals for Life. The guild was strategizing on how to clear out a particularly tricky room in the upper Blackrock Spire raid.
I think it's a pretty good plan. We should be able to pull it off this time. What do you think, Abdul? Can you give me a number crunch real quick?
Oh my god.
Yeah, give me a sec.
Oh.
I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, that's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this.
That's still funny. I don't care if it was fake or not.
Save him! Oh, geez, stick to the flame!
Oh, Jesus. Let's go, let's
God
go.
damn it, Leroy.
Stick to the flame.
And in the midst of the conversation, a group member, Leroy, charges in prematurely with reckless abandon, causing the death of the entire group.
I can't move. Am I lagging, guys? I can't move. What the hell? I can't aim. Oh my god. The eggs keep spawning. More respawning. I don't think you can cast with that shit. Oh my god. Shaq,
We got
take it off. I got it. Take it off.
Come on, stay down.
Oh my god.
God damn it, Leroy.
God damn it.
The video was
That's my
later
favorite
revealed
part.
to be staged, but nonetheless, it caught on like wildfire, and it was shared across multiple websites and forums,
Oh, yeah.
making it one of the first videos
Hell, people
for
still know what it
Warcraft
is.
to gain viral popularity. Onlookers were intrigued. Word of mouth proved to be a prolific advertising vehicle for the game. It's hard to say today just how many people watched the video, as some of the
Oh my
uploads have
God.
been lost. The original
No
upload
doubt.
on Warcraft movies today sits at nearly 19 million views, and the original YouTube mirror reached at least 46 million before it was taken down.
Of
And
course.
surviving mirrors today sit at a total combined count of around 24 million. Regardless, it's by
And
far
that's
the most viewed Warcraft-related video, even to this day, over 15 years
There
later.
you go.
It was so popular, in fact, that it was later
Jesus
featured as a
Christ.
question in the trivia show Jeopardy!
Jeopardy!
Just a few
I
months
remember that.
later in November.
This role-playing game out in 2004
And nobody got it, which is
returns to
sad.
the world of Azeroth, where heroes like Leroy Jenkins do battle. And that would be the world of Warcraft.
Pathetic. The Leroy craze wasn't the only phenomenon to spawn from the game, though. September of 2005 saw the release of the Zul'Gurub raid, the final encounter of which was a boss named Hakar. He had an ability called Corrupted Blood,
curse.
which dealt some damage to a player, and if they were to stand too close...
I still think this is very, very interesting that they actually use this in studies. That became relevant, obviously, with COVID, on how diseases spread throughout the world. Very interesting.
to another, it would spread to that person. In a contained environment, it's just another raid mechanic. That is, until one player intentionally or
they
otherwise
dismiss the
managed
pet.
to create a virtual pandemic that
Don't
spread
dismiss
across
your
every
pet
single server. The
when he's
mechanic
got
had
the
one
blood
fatal
curse.
flaw. By getting a pet companion afflicted with the disease and then dismissing it, it would persist when the pet is summoned once more.
What an
This
oversight.
person did just that, but in a crowded area, and spread the affliction
Jesus,
to
that's
every
funny.
nearby player and NPC. And as long as there were living hosts, there was no escape. Entire cities became infected by the plague.
If you have time, check out a video on that. Just specifically on that. Oh, I hit a button. Why did I hit a button?
Combined with the port.
It's very interesting to hear what the people did in game to avoid getting hit by this plague. forming their own encampments outside of cities, away from everybody else, and also the things that the Afflicted did to try and just basically grief those players. People be peopling. On. Watch the rugs all folded up. Yeah, it just got folded. Thank you. Alright, well, for some reason she's got to shut the door, so she must be getting loud. Anyhow, let's get back to the video.
Reception of the Battle for Azeroth, the reputation had quickly started to sour from that of a community-first industry innovator to one operated on greed, predatory business practices,
what the
and
fuck
cold
happened?
treatment of
Oh,
their
I hit a
employees
button.
And even
Jesus.
the following years.
Let's get into the Blood God. Holy shit, talk about moving ahead.
Contained environment
There we
is
go.
just another
Sorry
raid
about
mechanic. That is, until one
We'll
player,
get to the shitty
intentionally
Blizzard.
or otherwise, managed to create a virtual pandemic that spread across every single server. The mechanic had one fatal flaw. By getting a pet companion afflicted with the disease and then dismissing it, it would persist when the pet is summoned once more. This person did just that, but in a crowded area, and spread the affliction to every nearby player and NPC, and as long as there were living hosts, there was no escape. Entire cities became infected by the plague.
I wish they would have let this happen
Word
in
quickly
Classic
spread,
when they
and
released
other
it,
players
just to
intentionally
see what it
started
was.
spreading the disease. Ironforge, Stormwind, Orgrimmar, every major capital city was a death hub and was uninhabitable by lower-level players. The spread would continue to go on for days until Blizzard eventually hotfixed the disease, but the resulting chaos remains to this day to be one of the most memorable moments in the game's history, and has even been used in real-world research of the spread and reaction of contagious diseases.
What is this? Okay, well, let's find out what that is.
Though there are many memorable landmark moments in the game's history, some are more controversial.
My God. What is going on? I hope Ashira's dad dies of a heart attack, and then at the funeral some guy runs in naked and pushes the coffin over and runs around slapping people, screaming LOL owned. Then releases a video of it. What? Yikes. Well, let's see if we are back online. Looks like we just got a little blip. Nothing like kicking me offline in the middle of something.